Okay, so today in class we talked about the earthworm's anatomy that we're going to need to know for our dissection that we're going to be doing on Wednesday here. And we started with the external anatomy, so we're looking at the outside of the earthworm. We need to be able to determine what view are we going to be looking at. Now we have a couple different views, or a couple different ends of our earthworm that we need to know. If we see this swelling on the earthworm, this is called the clitellum, and it's going to be used for reproduction. This is one external clue that we can use to determine, are we looking at the head end or are we going to be looking at the tail end here. Now the clitellum is going to be located closer to the mouth than the anus. So we'll have the mouth down here, close to the clitellum, and then far away from the clitellum we're going to have the anus. Now when we're looking at these directions, if we're located near the head end or the mouth end, this is going to be called the anterior end. Anterior, we're going to see the clitellum, and then the posterior is opposite. And this is where we're going to see the anus. Now one way to tell if we're looking at the top or the bottom side of the worm is the top side of the worm is going to be kind of darker in color, and this dark color lets us know we're looking at the dorsal side. So the dorsal is going to be the back side or the top side of our organism, and it is dark in color. So then the belly side or the bottom side of our earthworm is the ventral side. And another external clue that can help us, other than looking at this dark color versus the light color, is on the ventral side, on each of these segments here on our worm, we are going to have little hair-like bristles that are going to help our worm move through the dirt. And these little bristles are called setae. So if we take our finger and run it along the belly side, we will feel that it's not going to be smooth. It's going to be a little bristly from the setae, which is here for movement. One last thing that we labeled with our external anatomy is cutaneous respiration, which means that our earthworm is going to be breathing directly through its skin. It's going to want to bring oxygen into its body while getting carbon dioxide out. And it needs its skin to stay moist, so this gas exchange can happen readily. And again, that is called cutaneous respiration, aka skin breathing. So this is it for our external anatomy. Anterior, near the head; posterior, the rear; dorsal, the top side, back side, dark in color; ventral, belly side, bottom side; and we have the setae for movement. Our clitellum, located near the anterior end, is going to be there for reproduction. Okay, we're ready to slice our worm open and take a look at some of this internal anatomy here. So if we flip this over and get it facing the right way so you guys can read. With our internal anatomy here, what we're going to do is we are going to pin down our worm, a pin at each end, both the anterior and posterior. I guess we can label this here for you. Anterior head and then posterior the rear. We have our worm pinned down in our dissection tray. We're going to use our scissors and we're going to make a little sideways cut, and then we will slide the sharp end of our scissors underneath the skin, and we're just going to kind of slide upwards, working on unbuttoning this earthworm shirt, and we're going to just pin it back so that way we can keep it open so we can see some of this internal anatomy here. We're going to work our way through a couple different systems here, following them start to finish, so that way hopefully we can kind of piece everything together here, and you can use this to study. We're going to start with digestive system here. We have our opening to the digestive system, which is the mouth. And the earthworm doesn't have a jaw, so as it's moving through the dirt and burrowing down, it keeps its mouth open, and that's going to shove dirt into its mouth. Once its mouth has been packed full of dirt, we see this muscle right here, directly behind the mouth, called the pharynx. And this is going to be the earthworm's throat. So it's going to help then take this dirt and then push it down its esophagus. This esophagus we probably won't see when we first open up our earthworm because it's going to be covered by some other organs that we're going to draw here in a second. But just know it is going to be under there, connecting the pharynx to the next location in our digestive tract, which is going to be the crop. And the crop's actually going to be pretty dark in color, so I'm going to go ahead and shade this in here before I label it. And the crop's job is to store food until it's going to be ready to be broken down. Now, we said that worms are going to be eating dirt as they burrow through the ground, so this crop is dark. It kind of has a brown dirt color to it. Directly behind the crop, we see the gizzard. And the gizzard is going to be a lot tougher than the crop. The crop's going to be kind of soft and squishy and able to expand as it fills with dirt. Gizzard's going to be a tough muscle that's going to squeeze and mash and grind the food and break it down so that way the nutrients will be ready to be absorbed. So our role for the gizzard here, we're going to say it's going to be the grinder. It's going to grind and break down the food. Once it's been mashed, the rest of the earthworm here is going to then have the intestines, which is going to absorb these nutrients. And that's going to be our digestive system here. I'm going to switch colors. I'm going to go to a pink color here. Hopefully you'll be able to see this on the video. Because our next system that we're going to take a look at is the circulatory system. So we see that the earthworm does have blood, and it's going to be flowing in a closed circulatory system. So it's in vessels throughout the body, not just kind of free floating in the cavity. Like we said, this esophagus is going to be covered by other organs. We start by seeing there are 5 aortic arches that are going to cover up the esophagus. Not that you guys can really see that that's in a red color. These aortic arches are going to kind of act like a heart, and they're going to pump the blood throughout the body of the worm. So it's just basically a thickened blood vessel that can squeeze and move blood throughout our worm. Sitting kind of on top of the crop and the gizzard along the intestines, on the back side, we see this dorsal blood vessel. Carries blood from the arches down to the length of our worm here. Which one thing we forgot to label here with our digestive system, sorry, I apologize. From the intestine, nutrients that are not absorbed are going to exit through the anus. So we can label that exit there. Okay, so back to our circulatory system. We have our aortic arches pumping blood down the dorsal blood vessel. We also see there is a ventral blood vessel that's going to go down the belly side here, sitting on either side of this intestine here. So we'll label this our ventral blood vessel. And that's our circulatory system. Pretty straightforward. I'm going to switch colors again, and I'm hoping that you guys will be able to see this color change. We're going to look at some of our reproductive organs here. And a earthworm is a hermaphrodite, which means it has both male and female parts. But it does need a mate for sexual reproduction that will happen outside of its body. if we look up here back by our esophagus underneath our aortic arches, we see this large white organ, and I'm drawing it in purple here, that's going to kind of cover up some of the aortic arches and cover up the esophagus here. And this large white organ is going to be the seminal vesicle. And the role of the seminal vesicle is to make sperm. If the earthworm is not ready to mate at the moment that sperm is going to be made, we see in front of the seminal vesicles there is a smaller white organ on either side of the esophagus here called the seminal receptacles that are going to store the sperm until they're ready to mate. So the vesicles are going to make the sperm, and the receptacles receive and store the sperm, located up here. I'm going to switch colors yet again on you because we're going to now look at the nervous system. A little bit more complex than the starfish that we just dissected. Near the anterior end, near the pharynx, we see that there is going to be a collection of nerves. And this collection of nerves at the anterior end is called a ganglia. And it's going to act like a simple brain. This ganglia is going to have some nerves that are going to then run down the belly side here. And I'm just going to kind of draw this squiggly line all the way down from the ganglia. This nerve that runs down the ventral side is called the ventral nerve cord. And it's going to be able to give some impulse feedback to our worm, be able to sense some movement here, and sense some light and dark. And this ventral nerve cord in the earthworm that we're dissecting will kind of look like fishing line. It's going to be white and very thin. And we may have to roll the intestines out of the way to get to see this ventral nerve cord. One last thing that we can add for our internal anatomy, and then we'll wrap up this video here. For those of you guys watching, thanks for making it this far, is we have some connective tissue that's going to attach the skin of the worm to the intestines, basically. And each of these segments is going to have some of this connective tissue. I'm only going to draw it a couple segments here, but it would go the entire length of our earthworm here. This connective tissue is called the septum, and it just holds the skin onto the intestines. So it's connective tissue. And this is what we need to know for our internal anatomy. Your notes are posted in Classroom. Basically, it follows this video and this diagram to a T. Look at the actual pictures of the earthworm dissection because it's got some good images there. And there is a couple practice quizzes that you guys can use to help you study. We will have a review session at 7:45 tomorrow morning. Come in and see me, and hopefully everyone will get an A+ on this quiz. See you guys then.